it's Joan. Today we're watching Heartstopper Season 3, Episode 4, Journey. I'm so proud of Charlie after that last episode and so hopeful for his journey where he's going next. Obviously, that hope is tinged with awareness that it's not an easy journey and it's not like, boom, he's fixed now. I mean, fix isn't the word I wanted to use there. Like, boom, he's all better now and nothing's going to trouble him again. Something else I did want to comment on was while editing the episode, I kind of looked at them again and I am really worried about Tori as well. Like, I think she definitely focuses a lot on Charlie's problems, which isn't Charlie's fault by any means. And, like, she seems very, like, lonely and isolated, so I do worry about her and whether she's looking after herself as well. But yeah, that's something I noticed when I was editing, that I thought, I don't really, like, my brain was too scattered while I was watching, so I am concerned about her, but I'm also worried about everybody because I love them all. Let's go. A reminder that you can find the unedited version of this reaction on my Patreon 2 weeks in advance, the edited version 1 week in advance, and let's go.
I can't believe it's been 2 months.
Yeah, same.
Wow. Yeah.
How are you feeling?
I mean, that is the important thing. Like, it's in a lot of ways, like, it sucks that he had to have 2 months out of his ordinary life, 2 months out of what he was doing, but it's so important that he got the serious help he needed and that it was treated seriously. It wasn't like, oh, he's acting. Like, no one, including the doctors and medical professionals, they all treated it seriously, and that does sound like a really significant thing.
But the first appointment for that wasn't until January. Things started to get really bad after that.
You can talk to us, Charlie.
Yeah, we're just worried about you.
What can you stop?
And then he stopped talking to me about it.
It's not a straightforward or easy road.
He started skipping school.
Okay, it didn't go as smoothly as I hoped it would. Not that I thought it would have gone smoothly.
It was just getting faster. And, you know, he told me he used to self-harm.
It's okay.
Oh,
Just shit
sweetheart.
all the time. It's been so horrible to you and everyone else.
Everyone who loves you understands, sweetheart.
Didn't feel like enough, but I guess I tried.
You did everything you
tried to just
could,
be there.
sweetheart.
I love you.
Oh, at the beginning of this episode, I was so hopeful that he'd kind of immediately been put into a treatment program and that, like, wasn't left on his own to spiral like this, but nope. So basically, little UK history, not history, current affairs knowledge for you if you are not from the UK and watching this reaction, hello. When the Tories came into power 15 years ago, we had the best rated, free national healthcare in the world. It was the best. Then they underfunded it for 15 years because they want it to go private so them and their friends can make loads of money. And now it's like, oh dear, we don't have a good healthcare system. It needs to go private. And no. So 10 years ago, maybe eating disorders weren't taken seriously. I don't know, but Charlie would have got better help. Blame the Tories for his suffering, okay?
We were so stupid.
I know, it's not your fault.
You're doing what you can, Nick, and I'm so sorry, Charlie.
Do you think maybe you should tell your parents?
That said, I had to make my decision.
Oh, sweetheart. It's not easy, but you're doing the right thing. Nick by being there for him and supporting him as best he can. And Charlie by trying.
Not sure I can help it.
It's babies. Yeah, it can be both.
No, wait. Top chumps.
Darcy's hair looks a lot more Darcy.
Top chump. Could use a night out. I know I could.
It's not betraying Charlie, sweetheart. It's living your life too, and he'd want you to. I did not think kids in the UK threw this kind of party. Like, this elaborate. I went to like a Halloween party, but it wasn't like this.
I love you.
How many of those have you had, sweetheart? Good for them. Or not. It's okay to go home, sweetheart, if you're not having a good time. It's okay if this isn't what you need right now. It's okay to miss him and worry about him. You both do. Oh, thank you, Tao. Thank you. You needed this. Because we're all feeling it.
I guess that makes sense.
I mean,
No
I was a
way.
bit surprised about the OCD, but...
It's good
I have
in
all these rules in my head about food and
yeah.
Well, even if you do have anorexia and OCD, the word sorry is still banned.
can't I?
She's getting very emotional again. I just love them so much. I'm so proud of Charlie, and in so many ways, like obviously finding out that you have anorexia and OCD, especially OCD that is controlling you so very much, is not easy, and it's not a good thing. It's not a yay moment, but it can be good to be able to put a label, a name on why you're feeling the way you're doing, on what you're doing. Like, you know, oh, I feel like this because of this reason. I'm not just crazy or bad or whatever, you know, like I haven't been fortunate enough to not have anorexia or OCD, but I know like with my chronic illness, when I finally was able to say, this is what's wrong with me, I'm not making these symptoms up, I'm not imagining it, there is a thing and this is what it is. It was kind of a weird relief, even though it meant I had this uncurable thing. It was still like, oh, that's a thing. Like, so I hope in that sense Charlie was able to get some relief from the official diagnosis of, yes, it's an awful diagnosis to have, and yes, it's not like something to celebrate, but a relief of there is something wrong with me. I'm not bad. I'm not like, I'm just unwell, and that's okay. Like, I mean, I hope. It's
Still not
just
sure if Tori likes me.
you make her brother happy, so she likes you right now, and you looked after him, so she likes you right now. Oh. This is really lovely.
Can you kiss me, please?
I'm so proud of you, Charlie.
I think it helped. I really do.
Me too. And even like I think it helped, that doesn't mean it's done. That doesn't mean he's gonna be just getting better on a clear, like, we want it to mean that. Everyone does. He deserves it to be that he's just gonna keep getting better until he doesn't even worry about it anymore. That isn't often the reality of it. But it did help. There's obviously the chance he was just putting on a brave face in front of visitors, but I don't, given that he has shown his vulnerable side, I don't think he would be doing that.
Would you say that you're thinking about food almost all of the time?
It's okay, darling.
Yes, I think that's accurate.
But I should count myself lucky that my parents could even afford it,
Mm-hmm.
and that I went to one that actually managed to help me.
Just, I think it's really important as well that they show Charlie having the positive experience here, because it can be scary, and when you Google and you see these horror stories, and the horror stories should be taken seriously, and the people that were affected should be given better help, and the places that hurt them should be stopped, like 100%. I'm not making light of that, but it's so important that people don't get put off by the what if it's a bad experience, because it can stop them from going and getting the good
And
experience.
it's also where I'm at.
Come on.
I think a part of me didn't even want to get better, because putting in the effort to change seemed too hard.
Yeah, that's a
Can't.
big,
I know you can.
huge step
I
in
thought food
getting
was something I
better.
could control.
The way you're like, I do want to get
But it
better,
was
but
the
there's
other
so
way
much
around.
of you that doesn't. I'm so proud of you for just all of this. It's hard. Putting in the work every day. And like, therapy sessions leave you exhausted. I can't even imagine what it would be like kind of when everything you're doing is about this, but I'm so proud of him.
He's my favourite. Your friends are quite annoying, but I like him.
I thought so.
Is it horrible there?
No, it's not horrible.
Just hard
It's hard,
work.
and I wish I was at home.
But I think it was a good decision.
I'm so glad to
That
hear
makes me
you
feel
say
better.
that, sweetheart.
Not that how I feel matters at all. And I had no idea.
I was good at hiding it.
I missed it.
This is a lot. They're just doing this so well.
He'll feel like he's been here the whole time. Because in a
He has
metaphorical
been.
way, he has.
How that doesn't even make any sense.
Yeah, it does.
He's in their hearts and they
Okay.
think about him all the time.
Here begins.
I hope that when you get back, you don't feel like you have to lie to us anymore.
because
I'm trying out they, them pronouns. I'm just seeing how I feel, I don't know. But I feel like you
Good
get
for
it.
you.
He gets it.
newest school prefect.
How? It's not a big deal. It's the biggest deal. My girlfriend is the smartest person in the entire world. She's a prefect. She goes to Oxbridge prep group. She dances. She plays the clarinet.
She's overwhelmed by this, the need to be perfect.
Being at the clinic didn't magically cure me of mental illness.
Of course not, my love.
I know it's scary. Ready?
You're so loved, sweetheart.
Maybe I won't ever get back to normal, whatever that is.
There
I
isn't
think
really
that's okay,
any
though.
such thing. Exactly.
It's not going to be a straightforward journey.
And knowing what you're
Probably just the
fighting,
beginning.
knowing that you have this mental illness and that's what you're working with.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
See, I mean, I think his parents are just trying their best.
Yeah.
Do I
Always.
have time to go and say hi to Nick?
Okay. Go on then.
I think his parents just aren't the best at handling things well, but their hearts are in the right place. Hi. Oh, there's just so much love in that hug. Oh my goodness. The moment it became obvious that Charlie was struggling from some kind of eating disorder or something along those lines, I felt like this was a show that I trusted to handle it well. And they really did. They didn't shy away from the emotions of it or how hard it was, but they also didn't make it seem kind of completely bleak and insurmountable. They acknowledged just how hard it was and how hard Charlie had to work and how that work will be a part of him probably forever, that a lot of mental illnesses do stay with you, but that also that it was a good thing, and that asking for help, he asked his parents for help and he was so convinced it was going to be awful and they weren't going to believe him, but they did, and they got him help. And they acknowledged that he was relatively privileged in that he was able to get help quickly, but like that's another thing. And that him going to this place, he received that help. They didn't try to pretend it's always going to be that way. They acknowledge that sometimes it cannot work for people. But I think that's just so important because so often in dramas, I mean, this isn't necessarily a drama, but they dramatize things and it's stressful and they really focus on how bleak it is. And I think when your sole focus is on the hopelessness of the situation, if you're watching and you're struggling from something similar, it's going to demoralize you and make you feel like there is no point. Why should I bother putting myself through what that character's going through, because they're still going to be struggling at the end of it. It's still going to be difficult at the end of it. Whereas with this, in no way are they saying, oh, Charlie talked to his parents and boom, he was magically fixed. Oh, Charlie went and had a hard couple of weeks, but now he's totally fine. They're acknowledging the struggles and how difficult it is and how it's not a magical fix, but the hope that people will be kind and look out for you, that your friends will still love you even if you have this mental illness, and that you can get better, you can do the work and you will get there. And by get there, I mean get better than you were before. It's still a process. I don't even know I'm explaining this point very well, but I mean it's just so important that there was so much hope throughout this episode, that I think was so important for any, particularly young people, but any people who are watching this who can see themselves in what Charlie's going through, to really look and see and think, I'm not alone. There's nothing super wrong and awful with me. Like, I am just suffering from a mental illness and that's okay. It's not my fault, and I can go and I can get the help I need. And there are people out there who will help me, because it's so important that people know that the help is out there and that they aren't hopeless. You know, Charlie felt like he was hopeless. He felt like there was no point, that he was not going to get better. And, you know, I think he admitted he wanted to get better, which broke my heart into 1,000 pieces and made me want to give him the biggest hug. But what he said in this episode about how also not wanting to get better, you can get stuck in a mental illness. In some ways, it's just easier to do things the way you're doing them, and the thought of the work you're going to have to do to get out of it, and then at the end of it you might not even be able to get out of it. You might not even be, like, all the work you might do might not even work, and you might be stuck where you were to begin with. It can be so hard to take that first step, and I just think they did such a brilliant job of handling it. And I will obviously put an asterisk that I have not suffered from the things Charlie has suffered from, thankfully, and I do not know anybody who has suffered from them, like, in my, like, people I'm close to. So I'm not like maybe there might be people who have experienced what Charlie's experienced and might have a different opinion. But it just, I think they handled it really well. And, you know, seeing Nick's side of it, seeing the friend's side of it, also, like, because it was just done so well. I mean, if you watch the episode, you know. Because, like, yes, obviously the focus when someone is ill, whether it's mental illness, cancer, any kind of illness, is obviously on the person who is ill, because they are the one that needs to get, that is suffering, they're the one that needs to get better, and that is trying to get better, I should say. But the people that love them suffer too, a different way. You can't really compare them, they are different. And it can be so hard when you can't really, like, for those 2 months, Nick was kind of just waiting, just going through the motions of life and waiting. And it just breaks my heart because they're so young to be going through something like this, to be in this kind of position. But their love is just so pure and true. And I just want to give them such big hugs. And I just think Tao was the one who really noticed that Nick needed someone. And I think partly because Tao was also feeling that way. I think Tao was distracting himself at that party by making the video for Charlie. Any feelings of, like, worrying about his best friend or worrying where he was, he and Isaac, they were making the video. They were focusing on Charlie. Charlie was right there in the center of their heads, and they were doing something for him. So it was kind of easier to push down any of that worry and grief. And also being romantically in love with someone is different to platonic. But the way Tao was able to just go and be there for Dick, and when I think of how much he didn't trust Nick to begin with, it was just such a beautiful moment. And I think they did such a brilliant job of showing Nick's worry and his suffering, but also showing that Nick wasn't being self-pitying, or he wasn't being like, oh, it's so hard for me because I'm in this situation. His focus was always on Charlie, and that is just what it's like when you love someone who's struggling. And it just, I think they handled it really well. I really do think it's important that in this show, ultimately, they asked adults for help, because I know it sounds silly, and I'm 30 years old saying this. I mean, I was always someone who would ask I always felt like I could trust my parents. Well, eventually just my mum, but regardless, I always felt that way, that I was safe, that I could come to them with anything if I had any need to. But there are so many kids who worry about that. And obviously there are kids like Darcy who maybe can't come to their parent, but there are other adults they can trust in their lives, and I hope they seek them out. But what I mean is, often in shows about kids, they don't tell their parents anything. And obviously some of these shows are more dramatized, less real. I mean, I'm thinking of things like Pretty Little Liars, but even other shows that are a bit more realistic, the kids just, they don't talk about things with their parents. They don't loop their parents in if they're struggling. And it tends to only be when something, like, Charlie would be hospitalized, and that's when he is like, oh yeah, parents, I'm struggling, if you know what I mean. Whereas in this show, yes, he got seriously unwell, and yes, you know, maybe if he had a more open relationship with his parents, he would have been able to ask for help quicker. But he did ask for help, and they gave it to him, and they love him. And I think, you know, his parents have frustrated me, because I don't think they've handled things perfectly, but there also isn't, you're not handed a guidebook on how to be the perfect parent. It's not easy, and it can be so easy to look at your kid and think, oh god, they're just being a sullen, stupid teenager, and not realise that actually they're drowning, because you probably think, well, if he was struggling, he'd tell me about it, because I knew about his previous struggles with being bullied and everything. Like, if he was really struggling, he would come to me. And I don't know, I guess it can be easy to kind of just assume everything's okay, because you also don't want everything to not be okay. But I think we saw in this just how loved he is by his family, by his sister, by his friends, and that in this episode I feel like Charlie really began to choose himself, and choose to fight back, and choose to fight for himself. And, or not even, I don't like using the term fight when it comes to illnesses, but he chose to prioritize himself and to think, I'm not powerless against this illness. I can look after myself. I can try. And even if every day isn't going to be a success, you can keep trying. And I just think that's so important. I think finding a therapist that you can work with, that you feel safe with, is so important when you're feeling any kind of issue. I mean, obviously, the majority of the biggest issue is that therapy is often expensive. Like in the UK, I know when I was like, I went to my doctor and I was like, I'm really struggling. And she was like, well, we can give you 7 sessions for free. After that, you need to pay for it. And it's like, oh, yeah, I'll be cured in 7 sessions then. Okay. Um, but it's not always easy to access therapy, but if you are able to, it's so important. Like, you know, you're realist, like they tell you, like, get a dentist checkup every 6 months. I think you should have a therapy appointment every 6 months if you're not having any like major life issues. I just think it's so important to look after your mental health, I think. And so for Charlie to kind of have this place where if things get really bad again, I suppose they can look after him again, but that's not going to happen. But a therapist he can see, someone he can talk to, where he feels safe and seen. And I do think, like I said during the reaction, it is just such a huge and important thing to know what it is you're dealing with, to know that it is anorexia with OCD, because just the relief of understanding why your brain is doing what it's doing, even if you're like, fucking hell, brain, really? Do you need to do that? To be able to think, okay, so my body is acting like this for this reason. It can really help you break the cycle of I am bad and wrong because, well, no, I'm just currently ill with these things. And I think that's so important. And not knowing you had these anorexia, not knowing you had OCD, how on earth were you ever expected to treat it, to deal with it, to notice the signs when it's getting bad and ask for help? So I do feel positive going forwards. And you know, the show, I don't know if it's the final season or not, I've got no idea. I mean, we're halfway through this season now, so I don't know whether we're just going to continue with Charlie's like recovery. Probably there'll be bad days, but ultimately he'll be on an upward spiral, or whether he's going to struggle a bit more and it's going to be kind of, I mean, again, I also, as much as I'm babbling on about this, I'm not an expert in what recovering from an eating disorder looks like. Obviously, I have not experienced it. Haven't been close to anyone who has been through it, so I don't know whether it would be normal for him to really struggle again. But I really hope, and I think this episode left you feeling with that hope, that it's not going to be straightforward. It's not going to be easy every single day. There are going to be bumps. There are going to be difficult days, but that he is on that road to looking after himself. He'll understand more now about why he feels compelled to do these things, and I really hope that it's just going to be something, and everyone that loves him knows, so that if he does start spiraling again, they will be able to see the signs more easily, because when you don't know there's something wrong with someone, it's easier to not notice it, if that makes sense. And you know, if something traumatic happens in his life, it might leave him more vulnerable to it triggering again, but the people around him will also know about that. And I'm just feeling so hopeful, and just so much love for these characters. I just want to wrap them up in the biggest hug ever, like they gave each other at the end of that episode, and pat their heads and just tell them how proud I am of them and how much I love them. So yeah, another emotional episode, another brilliant episode. A reminder that you can find the unedited version of this reaction on my Patreon 2 weeks in advance, the edited version 1 week in advance. And thank you so much for watching.